Hello, you wonderful mutants. Joel Clark again, lead designer of Lone Wolf Fists, and just perpetually tired motherfucker. Okay, so today I'm just on here to do a kind of a quick May catch-up thing. I've not been. I usually do these at the start of the month. I'm doing it nearly the end of the month, so a little awkward. Sorry about that. Mostly been muddling my way through a now even more confused sleep schedule. Here in the land of the midnight sun, my circadian rhythm has just gone out the window. So I will pay you good money to guess what time of the day it is right now. I got news for you. It's not an hour of the day in which I expected to see all this goddamn sunlight streaming into my window. But it's the weekend. So just because it's so critical to the design schedule of the game and the writing schedule of the game, just a quick update on like my life recently. It's been bonkers. So moved to a completely new state. And not only a new state, but like on the furthest edge of this continent. So I'm in a different hemisphere. It's well, I guess I'm in the same hemisphere, just way further northern latitude. Like it's bizarre and insane, and it's screwing with my sleep pattern. And I've got a full-time job now. It's a different line of work, so it's been very mentally taxing. And I'm trying to connect with people and get my social connections back, so that I have like a pool of people I can playtest with, and maybe stream with someday. I don't know, and just generally like have social connections, so I'm a healthy, well-balanced individual. Also, I moved up here so that I could co-parent my children, and I'm currently working through the legality of setting that up correctly and making certain that my place is good enough to have them on a bi-weekly basis. So it's been a lot of heavy lifting in my life, and I've not tried to deprioritize this game. I really haven't. This is still like up there, like the top three things that are constantly on my mind. I'm constantly working on, but one of the drawbacks of being such a time crunch is that it's really hard to have those big day-long luxurious like mental rant sessions when I can just think about a design issue and just sort of work my way through it. And I've often compared my design style to going into a mine to extract a vein of gold. Like, I go into this huge dark mine and I put in this ludicrous amount of effort to find, just because I found this tiny glimmer of gold, and I don't know how long that vein is. Sometimes it's a really rich one, sometimes it's very poor, but the effort to extract it is always Herculean, and I'm never entirely certain if I've extracted all of it until I've dug to the point where I'm simply not getting any gold from that vein anymore. And so the amount of slag writing, the pages and pages and books, entire notebooks stacked this high, filled with writing I will never ever use because it's garbage, it just doesn't work, is enormous. It's like mining. That's how I design games, apparently. And it's a very time and labor and thought intensive process. So, being time crunched whenever I hit an issue where I'm mining one of those veins, instead of just like writing from formula and from template, I'm much less productive as a result. And so you have these times like this month where I didn't even get to this until like way late into the month, which is very uncharacteristic. Usually these are a start of the month thing. Getting back into it though. I've been working on the bestiary. That is book 5 out of 7, I want to say. I've actually only got book 1 completely done, and which is the game philosophy and the core mechanics. Those are done. And occasionally I will find myself going back and adding just a little bit here and there just for clarity's sake. But it is actually quite good and quite done. It's yet to come to our editor, but that's going to be the next step once we get more sections done. Book 2, which is characters, which is all the options for character generations, all the core lore sheets and kung fu styles and the gup kala, and even the how do you level up system, all there, all in book 2. And I don't have all the kung fu done in that, because even though I've written all of it aside from, I want to say, one style, they all of the styles need a critical reexamination and a rebalancing to make certain that they all have distinct tactical niches, as well as that I don't have one move or one style that's like way or even significantly more powerful for the prana cost than any other one. And being as that I'm really the only person on the team, since I designed the system, that knows how it works, that is a slow process, because not only do I have to go back and make certain that all those little pieces fit together in the right way, I have to rewrite it so that it's clear to an audience, both for GMs and players, and it's referential in play, so it's not either too vague or too dense in text. And that can, in a game as complicated as this one, that can lead to some difficulties. one of the core things I did there was clean up the keywords so that they were more consistent. They were kind of all over the place, and I was sort of inventing keywords during the writing of the initial draft of those, or the most recent draft of those before the edited draft, or the pre-edit draft. Dear God, this has gotten complicated. But anyway, long story short, 6 of those 14 styles are now completed, which means 3 clans worth. And I have, when I sent the Gupt Kala and those styles to David Ramirez, he was like, these look really good. The Gupt Kala are still a little cloudy. The secret arts, like, being difficult to use was a problem that was in Legends of the Wulin too. So that is, like, at the end of writing and cleaning up all the Kung Fu, that's going to be my next target. I'm actually mostly doing that today. It's not glamorous writing, but once Book 1 and Book 2 are done, every single person with access to them has effectively the first draft copy of this PDF. It's pre-edit, and it's pre-art, it's pre-layout, but this is really close to what it's going to look like in its final form. Like, so close that it's going to be hard to hold them up together and see significant differences between the final text and the current text. Like, it's that done. That's super exciting to me. This is as complete and functional as it's ever been, and, like, it's huge that it got this far. I'm really, really satisfied with it. The other sections, and I want to make sure I'm reading these off to you guys, so you kind of know, like, where the writing is going to be. Okay, so Book 3, which I skipped over Book 3 and 4. I went right to Bestiary because I wanted to write some monsters, and part of the design has been trying to figure out how to make monsters work in this game. And I finally hit on, I think, a good way of doing it, but I'll get to that in a minute. So Book 1, the core philosophy of how the game runs, and the core rules. And these are player-facing rules. They're very much process-based. How you fight, how you explore, how you use skills. It's all player-facing rules. Book 3, Book 2 is going to be characters and all their options and Kung Fu and such like, and how they level up and all that stuff. So very, very comprehensive and clean there. And then Book 3 is the game mastery stuff, and it's very GM-facing. It's all about pacing the game. It's all about making content areas, stocking them with monsters and treasure, making plots. And I'm not really the kind of guy that tells stories with role-playing games. I'm the kind of guy that puts situations in there and just says, okay, what do the players do? Let's see what happens. But a plot, instead of it being like a plot of a novel, like something I would write as a GM, it's more like the plot that one of the powerful NPCs has that they're trying to hatch to make something happen and change the world. So it will materially alter the setting and what they'll encounter if they just let it spool out. And so making those and having and discussing how players can interact with them or not, what the consequences of either are, is a part of that section. So there's a lot of stuff like that that's very GM facing. It's not really, the players don't really give a crap about it, but a GM could really use that stuff. That's all in 3, and that's going to be, after I'm done messing with the bestiary, I'm going to jump on back and do that. Let me see. This is all kind of, I've got this in Google Docs, and Google Docs is this infuriating habit of reordering this stuff, so I numbered them so that I would know. Book 4, okay, so Book 4 is domains, and the domain section, like I said before, is one of the last things I had to significantly design. It's one of the last real design challenges left. Mostly what domains is like, this is what you do as a player whenever you're done, just because there's kind of like career moments for a character in this game, and they start off as like more or less like wandering minor level superheroes. Like, think of like the C-Team X-Men kind of thing, or a lot of beginning of the shonen anime characters where they're badasses. They're definitely better than a normal person, or even a really capable person, and they maybe have a couple of cool superpowers, and that's it. They can get overwhelmed, they can get beaten, they really risk death for their heroic stuff. Like, that's the early career of a Lone Wolf Fist character. But as they get further, as they get allies, and they get territory, and they get fortresses, and they get magic stuff, and more powers, and more health, and followers, and armies, and all that stuff, whenever they've got, like, stockpiled stuff, you come to this point where you need to make big picture decisions about, like, the direction of the emerging societies that you are saving, because you've kind of been more or less organically pushed to the forefront of them because you're the driving force that determines whether they live or die. And so that part of the game is the domain management part of the game. That's whenever you're like, okay, we need to fight this war, or we need to keep this war from getting fought. Like, the really big stuff. And a lot of that, a lot of the I want to forge a magic weapon. I want to create a culture. I want to lay down laws. I want to raise an army. I want to build tanks. Or the inverse of those things. I want to keep them from happening. I want to sabotage them. I want to systemically tear apart an evil empire. Like all of that stuff. That's all domain scale play, and how you run that is in chapter 4. So it's a big chapter with some complex stuff at its core. But it can't be, and the critical thing about it is that big is in concept, not in word count. The way you do that has to basically be an addendum to the core mechanics, which is exploring, fighting, leveling up, role-playing. Like, that's the stuff you are doing moment to moment in the game. And so the domain stuff is just, okay, how do we give players a view where they can see some of that bird's eye view stuff of the setting? How do we make that something that they can engage with meaningfully? How can we interpret that down to the point where players are taking actions with role playing and rolling dice and all that it's affecting those things? What is the smallest amount of mechanics we can add to the game where they're still materially playing the same game, but now the scope is broader and it feels broader? So a lot of the domain mechanics are that. They have to be small, even though the concepts are big. So there's not actually going to be a huge word count in that. Ideally, there won't be a huge word count there. There will be enough, though. And when you take that with the DM advice, you should have enough to do a satisfying campaign, no matter how powerful the characters become. Okay, so that's 4. Wow. I think there's 7 of these total. 5 is the bestiary, which is what I'm working on now, because I want monsters. And, like, this is a good time to talk about the bestiary and what I've been wrestling with the last month and a half. The mechanics of effort have this kind of awkward relationship with monsters, because like a monster in a lot of ways is just kind of like an animal, right? And they don't have to be, but like they're comparable conceptually, right? Ontologically, an animal and a monster have kind of this trait where they're defined by these significant physical features. So like a scorpion is kind of defined by its pinchers and tail, the same way that like a manticore is kind of defined by having like its sting and its weird man face and its lion body. You know, like those attributes aren't just they aren't healthily abstracted into a certain number of dice. That doesn't really fit. That works when it comes to like the kind of nebulous martial rankings of martial artists. This guy is X amount better than this other guy can be kind of abstracted with just having more dice. That translates into having more of the action economy resource. It's really elegant design. But when it comes to this monster has these traits, it's not directly comparable. And so using that same core mechanic doesn't produce good results. So I've had to find a way to keep enough of that mechanic that it's recognizable and you're not like abandoning that fighting system, while at the same time being true to what I'm trying to do with monsters, which is like an attribute-based fight encounter. And previous versions of the game had those, like, their own powers, they had their own, like, little health tracks, and so anatomy was, like, these little mini characters that were kind of on your shoulder that would do stuff in the game, and you could punch them off, and, like, that's kind of how that manifested in the rules. And there's a little bit of that still, but mostly their fighting stat, ferocity, which is what I called it, is just how good they are at fighting, and has no direct relationship to their size. Their size, their special anatomy, all of that is just a list of traits, which is, here's the physical trait, here's what it does for them. And health and size is one of them. So an elephant obviously is healthier and bigger and can do stronger actions than, say, a cheetah. And they both might even have comparable ferocity pools, because a cheetah is very naturally ferocious as a predator, and an elephant is generally docile unless they have to fight for whatever reason. And a lot of the strength they bring to it isn't really in like their fighting spirit or their cunning or their ability to just ruthlessly rip something to shreds. It's just more about the fact that they're big, and so they don't have a big ferocity pool comparatively, but like they have other attributes, and these attributes just give them these powers. Like when they attack, if they hit you, there's more kinetic force. I had a version of that in previous rules, and it's just a little more front and center now. And everything's kind of like that. It's more or less an itemized list of the significant physical attributes of a creature and what power that gives them. And like it took me weeks to get to the point where I'm like, oh, I can just completely decouple ferocity from skills. Why didn't I think of that before? This is the first time anyone's ever done this. Like, that's why I didn't think of it before. I really had to mentally experiment with it, and I haven't had a lot of time to sleep and think and just have time to myself to work on it. So that took a lot longer than I wanted it to, and it's kind of embarrassing how long it took. But my new take on monsters, I finally got to a point where I've kind of got them in categories, kind of like I have the Kung Fu in categories. And when I categorized it, and I was like, okay, this is the general template, and I'm just going to kind of wobble it around for the most part, and then when something needs to be consistently divergent from it, I'll give it its own unique kind of spin. That produced great results in terms of like page count. You know, I was able to get tons of Kung Fu done, tons of Gut Kala done really quickly when I did that. And so I'm just doing that same thing with the monsters. And the upswing of doing it in that kind of like lazy categorical way is that they are actually kind of balanced in terms of like what you pick up from the rules and like what that does at play. You know, if I get a cheetah or a lion or a tiger, I kind of know what they're going to do in play and how they're going to feel because they're all sort of based on that sort of big cat template, you know? And I don't think I've got it that categorized. Like, I've got it more like animal, predatory animal, person, magical person, monster, deadly monster. So like the categories are a little more are a little broader than big cat or, you know, whatever. But it's still that same kind of effect should still transpire. And that means that here, once I've finally got chapter 2 done, I should be able to blaze through chapter 5 or book 5. It's not really a chapter, but whatever, and get a bunch of monsters. There's 70 monsters to make. It helps if they're categorized that way. And I'm kind of excited about the really big ones because I want to be able to make like gigantic Shadow of the Colossus / Monster Hunter big monsters that you can fight. And I've been designing rules for how you move while you are on a monster's body. So there should be really fun stuff there. Book 6 is the armory, so where all the tanks and rockets and bombs are going to be. And then book 7 was, where is it? I want to say book 7 was the clan lores, and I might actually just put those into book 2. I haven't decided yet. This is clan lores, lands, notable characters, plots, and other useful things. So the idea behind this, because I don't have an intro adventure for this game that isn't just Blood and God's Eye, which is its own product. There's no real intro adventure within the core book, but there needs to be kind of a Yoon Soon-esque grab bag of you can take these elements, mash them together in different ways, and get a totally unique post-apocalypse, or you could mash them together exactly as they're presented and just get the post-apocalypse that's presented in the book. That's really important, and it replaces the function of lore sheets. Lore sheets were basically, if you want this element of the setting to be very present in your game, you put the lore sheet in your game. And so you could get different kinds of blends of story depending on how you set up your lore sheets, because the characters have different options. Players have different options for grabbing things and making them more relevant. And I liked this design in terms of the relevancy not really existing until the players wanted it in the game, because that way you weren't constantly like throwing stuff at them that didn't really go anywhere. And that's admittedly one of the issues that I have as a GM, where like I just kind of like roll on random charts and stuff shows up in the game, and a lot of times the players are like, that was weird, let's move on, and they just never go back to it at all. And so it feels a little, that's not necessarily bad, it's just a little discordant once in a while. But lore sheets had because it wasn't just you encounter a pterodactyl riding Jawa with the blaster, like that's a little too out of left field. A lore sheet would be like, here's why you encounter that. You know, they're part of this secret society of pterodactyl riding Jawas with blaster rifles. I watched The Mandalorian recently. I hadn't seen it. It's really good, but that's why I've got Jawas on the brain. But yeah, so Yoon Soon did a really good job as a product of taking that kind of like setting stuff and turning it into just like old school D&D-esque charts and keeping the cohesion while at the same time not really sacrificing the sort of off the wall, we don't know what we're going to encounter flavor of that kind of gaming. So that's kind of what I want to do with part 7. And I've done a couple of drafts of that where there's very, again, Yoon Soon-esque, here's a crazy ruler, here's how they're crazy, here's what their cult is like, here's its special power. That's really nifty. And it's really appropriate to the post-apocalypse to run into like stuff that's very off the wall, but still sort of vaguely recognizable. Like Mad Max did that, Fallout did that, well, the good Fallouts did that. Yeah, I really want to do it. And I don't want to, I keep not wanting to hang up the design of the game because I want it to be done so you guys can just physically have the book. But also, I do want that in there. I think it's critical for running the kind of game that I want for it to be in there. But yeah, so that's where these 7 chunks are going to be. Right now, finishing up book 2, which is character. Gonna do book 5 next couple of weeks. Is going to be working on just like filling out monsters. So that should be done reasonably shortly. And then we've got domains, which are with the GM section, and domains, which are going to be pretty significant. The GM section's advice is going to have to be very carefully considered because in terms of word count, it should be brief and usable and readable, but still comprehensive. So that's a tough cookie to crack. And then domains, it may take me some time just to sit there and just adjust it just little bitty bits at a time until it's right. That's the actual game design. It's not just writing down and figuring out how to write down content. That's actually designing the knobs and switches that make the game function. So that might take a little while. Armory shouldn't take super long. I imagine it'll be categorical, kind of like the monster section. I'll need to figure out exactly what I want in there. Weapons, armor, magic weapons and armor, tanks, rockets, bombs, helicopters, stuff like that. I'm probably going to have to just determine, where's the line? Are they going to have, modern-day jets that they can be in? It happened in Fist of the North Star, so maybe it has to happen in here. And thinking of a way to represent that in a novel way that's fun to play and to fight. I mean, that maybe that's a little too far, but that's going to be that. And then Chapter 7 is going to be the lores. It didn't take me super long to write the Golden Lions and Radioactive Scorpions lore once I realized what I wanted from them and how to represent it. So I don't imagine it'll take super long. It's mostly just here's some cool ideas I've had. Here's how they can show up in your game in a usable way. We'll see. We'll see how long that one takes me. But yeah, that's what's going on. Look forward to having a very playable core game. As a matter of fact, a more playable game than a lot of role-playing games that get published. Just from me completing this Section 2, or Book 2, and Section 5. That should be in the next couple of weeks to a month. That should be done. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, my energy level holds out, and I'm able to be productive. But yeah, so it's going to be almost everything anyone wanted from Lone Wolf Fist or expected it to be done and available to you guys and handed to you because you've already paid for it effectively. And then the rest of the project is mostly going to be making certain this goes from being enough to function to being the best product it can be and really putting itself on the map. So yeah, I've been talking for almost 25 minutes. I'm going to let you guys go. Thanks for all of your continued patience. I promise I will continue working and giving you cool shit. Until then, peace out.